My brother and his wife willingly stayed blind to what their son was doing, so I opened their eyes in public. My nephew's violent disorder destroyed my family, so I gave him the wrong medication at a charity. When my brother Josh and his wife Katrina found out that their 6-year-old Jake had ODD, they put a plaster on it and called it good. That plaster came in the form of expensive nannies and a crap ton of sedatives to keep Jake essentially a vegetable. I remember they brought Jake over to our house for the first time when he was 8, and that's when the real trouble began. For those who don't know, ODD is essentially a mental disorder that triggers extreme violence without care for consequence. When Jake came over, he wasn't on his sedatives, and he wasted no time going outside and finding a frog to squish in the back garden. I remember my wife telling him that wasn't nice, and he outright slapped her in the face for it. I called his parents immediately, but they didn't answer. They were on a cruise, their phone was off, and Jake was ours for the next 4 days. Those 4 days were the worst of my life. And by the time Jake turned 12, he was a full-blown monster. I'd heard he cornered a classmate at her 10th birthday party and put his hands where they shouldn't go. The little girl ran crying to her parents. They were furious until Jake's parents wrote them a check for $150,000. And they agreed to let it go. Then there was the time Jake took a baseball bat to my truck windshield because I told him he couldn't have the $100 bill in my wallet. Of course, I told his parents. And my brother Josh's response was to send me a check to cover the damages. The breaking point came last Thanksgiving at Josh's house. My wife, Frances, was 5 months pregnant with twins after years of fertility treatments. We'd spent everything we had trying to have children. She asked Jake to wash his hands before dinner and he screamed, "You're not my mom." Then he shoved her down their marble staircase. I can still hear the sound she made hitting each step. The ambulance took forever. The bleeding wouldn't stop. We lost both boys that night. 2 perfect babies we'd already named and loved just gone because a 12-year-old threw a tantrum. Josh and Katrina showed up at the hospital with their lawyer immediately. My wife was literally unconscious, hooked to machines, and the first thing they started talking about was how much the bill would cost. Katrina offered to pay it. While Josh told me they'd help pay off our mortgage and give us money for another IVF treatment if we didn't press charges. That's when I knew I had no choice. I had to stop them. I ended up taking the deal as part 1 of my step. Because the thing was, they were always honest about money. They were so rich that $50,000 in medical bills and a mortgage for a small house was nothing to them. But it meant everything to me and Frances. The second we got the money, my plan went into action. I ended up finding out that Josh and Katrina only took Jake outside with them 4 times per year. And every time, it was to their country club's charity galas, where they could pretend to be great parents with a great kid, while their Jake was on enough sedatives to put a hungry lion to sleep. This was my chance. I was an electrician and had been working on this country club. And pretty soon, the Christmas gala at which they were being honored for supporting troubled youth programs was coming up. I knew Jake's routine from Maria, his latest nanny, who'd quit after he broke her nose. Josh and Katrina always gave him Ativan before events, triple dose to keep him quiet while they collected their praise. The morning of the gala, I went in early to check some wiring in their prep room. Josh and Katrina were already there practicing their speech. We had been on great terms ever since I refused to press charges, so they were more than happy to see me. I pretended to be happy too. And then, while Katrina's purse was set down on a chair in the corner, I snuck over to it while they were too distracted. I pretended to look at the socket behind the chair whilst really I was looking quietly unzipping the purse. Bingo. Inside, I saw Jake's sedatives. 3 white tablets in a little bag, even labeled. I had my own bag with me. White tablets that looked the same, but definitely weren't Ativan. They were Adderall. Stimulants and ODD don't mix well. The switcheroo took seconds, and when I got back up after fixing the socket, I wished them well and headed out to change. By the time the gala started 5 hours later, I was in the audience dressed in the nicest suit with Frances next to me. She knew what was going down. And when we looked at Josh and Katrina, who sat at the head table with Jake between them, we were trying not to burst out laughing. Jake looked wrong already. He was twitching and scanning the room like a caged animal, far removed from the sedated boy they expected. Either way, Josh and Katrina were called to the stage soon. Jake was supposed to stay seated. That was the plan. But the Adderall had kicked in hard. He stood up to follow them up, and Katrina tried to guide him back. That's when he pushed her back and ripped away from her. Josh and Katrina exchanged glances, nodding at each other to let Josh stay here and pray he doesn't do anything. Of course, that didn't happen. Josh took the microphone and started speaking. As parents, we understand the challenges. And with that, Jake exploded. You don't understand anything. You're never home. You don't even like me. Everyone's jaws dropped and my wife and I were trying our best to hold it in, but the show was only starting. Jake grabbed the microphone from Josh's hand. Josh tried to wrestle it back, but Jake kicked him in the shin, hard. The whole room gasped. I watched Josh's face turn red as he hopped on one foot. Katrina rushed over from her seat, but Jake was already going off. He started telling everyone how his parents locked him in his room. How they made him take pills that made him sleepy all the time. How the nannies were mean to him. Some of it was probably true. Most of it wasn't. But the crowd didn't know that. They just saw a kid having a breakdown while his parents stood there frozen. The event coordinator tried to cut the mic, but Jake had a death grip on it. He swung it at anyone who came close. One waiter got clocked in the jaw trying to help. Blood started dripping from his nose. That's when security finally showed up. Two big guys in black suits moving toward the stage. Jake saw them coming and panicked. He threw the microphone at Josh's head and bolted right through the emergency exit. The alarm started blaring. Josh and Katrina ran after him. Half the room followed to see what would happen. Francis squeezed my hand under the table. We stayed seated and watched through the windows. Jake was sprinting across the golf course with his parents chasing him. Katrina's heels kept sinking into the grass. She kicked them off and kept running barefoot. Josh was yelling Jake's name over and over. The security guards were gaining on them. Then Jake disappeared into the darkness near the pond. Everyone lost sight of him. The search lasted 2 hours. They found him hiding in the pool house covered in mud. He'd fallen in the pond trying to catch frogs. When they dragged him back, he was screaming about how everyone hated him, how he wanted to go home, how his stomach hurt. The Adderall was probably wearing off by then. Josh and Katrina looked destroyed. Their perfect image shattered in front of everyone who mattered to them. The charity gave their award to someone else. People were whispering and taking videos on their phones. Some lady asked if Jake needed medical attention. Katrina snapped at her to mind her own business. That just made things worse. By the time they got Jake to their car, he'd thrown up twice all over Katrina's designer dress. She was crying. Josh looked like he wanted to punch something. They drove off without saying goodbye to anyone. The next morning, Josh called me. His voice was ice cold. He knew something was off with Jake's medication. He'd had the remaining pills tested. Found out they were stimulants. He asked if I knew anything about it. I played dumb. Told him maybe the pharmacy messed up. Maybe one of the nannies switched them. He didn't buy it, but he couldn't prove anything. He said we were done as brothers, that I crossed a line, that he'd make sure I regretted this. I told him to prove it was me first. He hung up. Francis asked if I was worried. I wasn't. What could he really do? Call the cops and say his brother maybe switched his kid's illegal triple dose of sedatives? Good luck with that. Plus, everyone at the country club saw what happened. They saw the real Jake. The one Josh and Katrina had been hiding with substances and money. Word spread fast in their social circle. Suddenly, people remembered other incidents. Other kids Jake had hurt. Other checks that had been written. The country club started getting complaints. Members didn't want Jake at events anymore. Some threatened to leave if he showed up again. Josh's business partners started asking questions. Was his home life stable? Could he handle big accounts if he couldn't handle his own kid? One deal fell through. Then another. Katrina's charity friends stopped inviting her to lunches. Her book club asked her to take a break. Their perfect life was crumbling, but they still had money. And money meant lawyers. Good ones. The letter came 2 weeks later. Certified mail. Had to sign for it and everything. The postal worker made me show ID twice, like she was delivering state secrets instead of what I knew was coming. Josh was suing me for defamation and emotional distress. Said I'd orchestrated the gala incident to damage his reputation. The amount he wanted was insane. More than my house was worth. More than I'd make in 10 years. The number had so many zeros, I had to count them twice to believe it. Frances went pale when she read it. Her hands shook as she set the papers down on our scratched kitchen table. We both knew Josh had no real proof about the pills, but that didn't matter. He had money for lawyers who could drag this out forever. Make our lives hell with depositions and court dates. Drain what little savings we'd rebuilt. The legal system wasn't about justice when one side had unlimited resources. I called 3 lawyers that week. They all said the same thing. Josh's case was weak, but defending against it would cost a fortune. One guy quoted me $50,000 just to start. Said that was the friends and family discount. We didn't have $50,000. We barely had $5,000 after paying off the medical bills from Frances's fall. Josh knew exactly what he was doing. He couldn't prove I switched the pills, but he could bleed us dry trying to defend ourselves. Classic rich person move. Used the legal system as a weapon. I was at work when Katrina showed up. Just walked onto my job site like she owned the place. Picking her way through the mud and designer flats. Told my supervisor she was family and needed to talk to me about an emergency. He gave me 15 minutes, but I could tell from his face this better not become a habit. She looked different. No designer clothes or perfect makeup, just jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. Dark circles under her eyes. Her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She said Jake was getting worse. The gala incident triggered something. He was having violent episodes daily. They'd gone through 6 nannies in 2 weeks. No agency would send them anyone anymore. She looked desperate, almost feral. She wanted to know what I gave him. Needed to know so doctors could help. Her voice cracked when she asked. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. She started crying. Real tears. Not the fake ones she used to get her way at charity events. Said Jake tried to stab Josh with a kitchen knife yesterday, that they were considering sending him away to a facility. Her perfect family was falling apart. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered my wife bleeding on their marble stairs. Our 2 boys who never got to take a breath. The dreams we'd had for them. The nursery we'd painted blue. I told Katrina to leave. She begged me to tell her the truth. Said she'd get Josh to drop the lawsuit if I just admitted what I did. I knew it was a trap. Probably recording the whole conversation on her phone. I kept my mouth shut and went back to work. That night someone slashed all 4 tires on my truck. No cameras in our neighborhood. No witnesses. Could have been anyone. But I knew, the cuts were too clean, too deliberate, professional job. The next morning, Frances found our mailbox smashed. Metal twisted beyond repair. Day after that, someone called my boss saying I've been stealing copper wire from job sites. Complete lie, but I had to deal with an investigation. Had to account for every hour, every material. Josh was playing dirty, making our lives miserable bit by bit. We installed cameras, changed our locks, varied our routines, started checking under the truck before driving, but the harassment kept coming. Pizza deliveries we didn't order. Magazine subscriptions in my name. Someone reported us to animal control saying we were abusing our dog. We didn't even have a dog. Had to prove that to a very confused officer. Each incident was small. Nothing we could prove came from Josh, but the stress was calling us. Frances started having panic attacks, couldn't sleep, lost 15 pounds in a month. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. I wanted to fight back, but she begged me not to escalate. Said we should just weather it until Josh got bored, but Josh wasn't getting bored. If anything, he was ramping up. 3 weeks into his campaign, I came home to find Frances sobbing at the kitchen table. Someone had called her work, told her boss she was stealing from the company. Total fabrication, but now she was under review. Might lose her job. We needed that income. Especially with the lawyer bills starting to pile up. The stack of legal documents on our counter grew daily. That's when I decided to hit back, but I had to be smart about it. Josh had money and connections. I had to use what I knew about him, and I knew plenty after 30 years as brothers. All the secrets he thought were buried. Like how he'd been cheating on Katrina for years. Had a whole other woman set up in an apartment downtown. Katrina had no idea. Too focused on her charity work and pretending Jake was normal. I'd seen Josh there once when I was working a job nearby. Followed him just to confirm. Some blonde named Andrea, maybe 25. Josh was paying her rent and buying her jewelry. Classic midlife crisis stuff. The apartment was nicer than our house. I took pictures. Not to use right away. Just to have insurance. But first, I needed to deal with the immediate problem. The harassment. The lawsuit. The constant stress that was destroying my wife. I started documenting everything. Every slash tire, every false report, every weird phone call, built a file, dates, times, details. Then I did something risky. I reached out to Maria, the nanny who'd quit after Jake broke her nose, found her on social media working at a daycare across town, sent her a message saying I was sorry about what happened to her, that Josh and Katrina should have done more. She responded immediately. Turned out she was mad. They made her sign an NDA when she quit, paid her off to keep quiet about Jake's violence, but she kept records, photos of her injuries, texts from Katrina begging her not to go to the police, details about all the other nannies who'd been hurt, a whole folder of evidence she'd been sitting on. She wanted to help, but was scared of violating the NDA. I told her about the lawsuit, about what Jake did to my wife, about the babies we lost. She agreed to meet me. Coffee shop downtown, public place. She looked nervous as hell. Kept checking over her shoulder. Jumped every time the door opened. But she brought the goods. A whole folder of evidence. Not just about Jake, but about Josh and Katrina's cover-ups. How they'd threatened previous nannies. Bribed parents. Even paid off a teacher who'd reported Jake to child services. It was worse than I'd thought. They'd been protecting him consequences for years, enabling him, creating a monster. The folder was thick with incident reports, medical records, sworn statements. Maria said she wasn't the only one who wanted to talk. There was a whole network of former nannies, parents whose kids had been hurt, teachers who'd been silenced, all bound by NDAs or scared of Josh's lawyers. But if someone gave them a reason to come forward, a way to do it safely, they might. I asked what she meant. She said if Jake hurt someone publicly, someone who wouldn't take a payoff, someone who'd press charges, then all the NDAs in the world wouldn't matter. The truth would come out. Everyone would come forward. Josh and Katrina couldn't silence everyone, not if it became a real scandal. The dam would break. I thanked Maria and left with the folder. My mind was racing. I had dirt on Josh now, evidence of cover-ups, but I needed more. Needed something that would force their hand, make them back off or face consequences. That's when I remembered Lawrence. This guy I knew from way back. Used to be a private investigator before he retired. Did some security consulting now? Kept his ear to the ground. Still had contacts everywhere. I bought him a beer and showed him what I had. He whistled low. Said Josh had made a lot of enemies over the years. Business rivals he'd screwed over. Former partners he'd betrayed. People who'd love to see him taken down a peg. Lawrence offered to make some calls. See who might be interested in my information, not for money. Just to share the wealth. Let Josh know he wasn't the only one who could play dirty. Within a week, things started happening. Josh's biggest client suddenly had concerns about his family situation. Wanted to know if the rumors about his son were true. Then a reporter started sniffing around, asking questions about Jake's school incidents, why he'd been expelled from 3 different private schools. The country club launched an investigation into the gala incident. Several members had complained. They wanted to know if Jake posed a danger to other children at the facility. Josh was scrambling, putting out fires left and right. His perfect reputation crumbling. His lawyer called mine, suggested we meet to discuss a settlement. Maybe we could work something out without going to court. I knew he was feeling the heat, but I wasn't done yet. See, Frances's cousin worked at the same hospital where they'd taken her after Jake pushed her. She'd mentioned something interesting over dinner one night. The hospital had security footage of that night, including Josh and Katrina showing up with their lawyer while my wife was still unconscious, talking about money before they asked if she was okay. The hospital kept footage for a year. We were at 11.